You ever sit in a lawyer's office, heart pounding, expecting to hear your name read off in your father's will, only to hear everyone's name but yours? Yeah, that was me. My siblings walked out with land, money, stocks, even my grandfather's old war medals. Me? I walked out with silence, but what they didn't know was that a four-star general would thank me, live on national television just months later. And when that happened, my entire family finally had to reckon with who I really was. I grew up in a family where status was everything. We weren't rich, not by any stretch, but we sure acted like it. My dad ran a regional insurance firm in Ohio, and Mom was your classic country club type. Hair always done, pearls even at the grocery store. My siblings, Todd, Lacey, and Martin, fit right in. Me? I was the odd one out from the start. I liked fixing radios, not golf swings. I volunteered at the VFW hall instead of schmoozing at church socials. They called me the quiet one. But the truth is, I just didn't see the point in all the fake smiles. Dad always said, "You'll never make it if you don't play the game." And I'd reply, "Some of us are too busy actually doing the work." That never sat well. When I turned 18, I joined the Army. No one showed up to see me off at the bus station except my best friend Ricky, who gave me a worn copy of Flags of Our Fathers and said, "Show 'em what grit really looks like." I didn't join for glory. I didn't join because I wanted to prove a point. I joined because I wanted to do something that mattered. Basic training was hell, but I loved every second of it. Something about the discipline, the order. It gave me a sense of purpose I never had growing up. While my brother Todd was inheriting Dad's firm and Lacey was marrying her second banker husband, I was learning how to lead men into combat. But the real turning point, that came later. I served quietly, never made headlines, never chased medals, but I kept rising, sergeant, then staff sergeant. Then I was handpicked for logistics coordination in a classified division. That's where the real work began. Let me tell you something most civilians don't understand. Logistics is what wins wars. You can have the best fighters in the world, but if you don't get them water, ammo, or medevac in time, you've already lost. I moved supplies through war zones like a ghost. I made impossible timelines work. I kept people alive. But back home, my family never asked what I did, never even sent a care package, not once. Instead, when I came back stateside for the occasional leave, I got the same old, "Still doing that Army thing? When are you going to settle down and join the family business? You could have had a real career, you know." I stopped correcting them after a while. I just let them believe whatever they needed to sleep at night. The day Dad died, I got the news through a forwarded email, not a call, not a text, a forwarded email from my niece. I flew home anyway, wore my dress uniform out of respect. I stood in the back during the funeral. No one acknowledged me, not even when I saluted the casket. And when the will was read, well, that's when the real gut punch came. Dad left Todd the business, Martin got the lake house, Lacey got the antique jewelry and 2 trust funds for her kids. Me? Nothing, not even a mention. When the lawyer glanced up at me and muttered, "Sorry, son," I just nodded. Truth was, I expected it, but there was one thing they didn't expect. 1 week later, I got a call from the Department of Defense. They wanted me to appear at a ceremony in D.C. They were honoring select veterans who had contributed significantly to national security in non-combat roles. My name had come up twice from 2 different generals, and one of them wanted to present the award to me himself. I flew into D.C. on a red-eye, wearing the same boots I'd worn through 2 continents and a dozen deployments. The hotel they put me in? Fancy. White tablecloths, elevator music, staff who called me sir like they meant it. I wasn't used to that. Most of my career, I'd been behind the scenes. We weren't the guys running through gunfire. We were the ones making sure the guys who did had what they needed when it mattered most. And that's probably why my family never understood me. They wanted headlines and business cards. I was more about silent victories, the kind nobody claps for, but everybody depends on. At the rehearsal for the ceremony, I tried to fade into the background. I'm not good at spotlights. But the assistant from the Pentagon came up to me with a clipboard and said, "Sir, you'll be seated up front. General Matheson requested it." That stopped me cold. General Elias Matheson. That man was a legend. 4 tours in Iraq, 3 in Afghanistan, and now heading homeland operations. If he remembered me, it wasn't because I made coffee. Back in 2013, I'd been assigned to a logistics task force operating under a veil so thick I couldn't even tell my own CO what we were doing. We were moving specialized tech, communications intercept gear, drone fuel cells, mobile satellite relays, into zones so hot the map might as well have been on fire. The orders came straight from top brass, and one of the signatures was Matheson's. We pulled off 3 precision drops in 72 hours, and on the last one I improvised a reroute that saved a full unit from being ambushed outside Mosul. Nobody clapped. Nobody gave me a medal. But 2 months later, Matheson's office sent a letter, classified of course, simply saying, "Your team's work prevented a mass casualty event we will not forget." And now, 10 years later, here he was, remembering. The day of the ceremony, I shaved twice, wore my pressed uniform, stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. Not because I thought I looked sharp, but because I didn't recognize the man in front of me. I'd spent decades being invisible. Now someone with stars on his collar wanted to say my name into a microphone. As I took my seat, I looked around the room. Congressmen, retired admirals, families with framed pictures of sons and daughters who didn't make it home. This wasn't some pats on the back event. This was the real thing. When they called my name, the room went quiet. Staff Sergeant Eric Hale, United States Army, retired. For exemplary logistical command and unshakable service to national security and operations that remain, to this day, classified. That was all they could legally say. But then General Matheson stepped forward, took the mic, and added, against script, "Men like Sergeant Hale don't ask for credit. They don't show up in the history books, but without them, half the missions you've read about would have failed. We don't win wars with firepower alone. We win them with people like him." He looked me dead in the eye. "Thank you for keeping us alive when nobody else could." And then he saluted me, on national television. I wish I could say I walked out of there with nothing but pride. But something unexpected happened. My phone started blowing up, not from buddies, not from the Army, but from back home. Apparently the ceremony aired on a morning news special. My sister Lacey caught it while sipping coffee on her sun porch. Todd's wife saw it on YouTube and sent it to the family group chat. Now they were the ones who were shocked. The same people who used to call me the handyman in uniform were now leaving voicemails like, "Eric, why didn't you tell us you were doing all that? We didn't know. We just didn't know. Your father would have been proud." That one stung the most, because I don't think he would have. 3 weeks later, I flew back to Ohio, not to make a scene, just to help Ricky, my old friend, patch a leaking roof on his shop. But word got out I was in town, and wouldn't you know it, my brother Todd ran into me at the hardware store. He gave me one of those forced half smiles, the kind that tries to look humble but doesn't quite stick the landing. "Hey man, saw the thing with the general. Pretty amazing. You always were full of surprises." I nodded. "Thanks." He cleared his throat. "Look, about the will. That wasn't personal. Dad just He didn't think you were coming back. Ever. He figured you made your own path. I looked him dead in the eye. He was right. I did. And then I walked away. After that run-in with Todd at the hardware store, I figured that was it. I'd come home, helped my buddy with his roof, and was planning to disappear quietly like always. But it didn't go that way. 2 days later, I was in line at Marcy's Diner. Place still has the best chicken fried steak in the Tri-County area, when I heard someone call out, "Hey, you're that guy from TV." I turned around, and it was a guy named Kenny. Used to bully me in middle school. He slapped me on the back like we were old war buddies and said, "Heard you were some kind of secret hero. Can I buy you a coffee?" I chuckled and said no thanks, but the attention didn't stop there. I couldn't even pump gas without someone coming up and saying, "We're proud of you." One old-timer even saluted me. Word had gotten around, and for once, it wasn't twisted. About a week into my visit, I got a call from Martin, my youngest brother, the one who used to copy my homework and then make fun of me in front of his friends. "Hey, Eric," he said. "Mom's been wanting to see you. She didn't know about the ceremony." I didn't answer right away, because here's the truth. I hadn't seen my mom in over 4 years. Last time I visited, she spent the whole dinner talking about Todd's new condo and how Lacey's kids were little Harvard-bound geniuses. Didn't ask me one thing about my life, but something in Martin's voice felt different. Not quite humble, but not arrogant either. More like a man realizing something might have been missed. So I agreed. The same porch swing still creaked. The same rose bushes still lined the walkway. Everything looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. My mom opened the door and stood frozen for a moment. Then, to my complete surprise, she stepped forward and hugged me. Tight. "Eric, I didn't know," she whispered. We sat in the kitchen, the one where I'd eaten thousands of quiet, awkward meals as a kid, and drank coffee. She kept glancing at me like I might disappear. "I watched the clip," she said. "You looked like your father, but more sure of yourself." I just nodded. "What do you say to that?" She reached over and held my hand. "I always thought you were just lost. But you weren't, were you? You just weren't ours." That hit me in the gut, because she was right. Later that evening, my siblings came over. Lacey brought wine like it was Thanksgiving. Todd had on one of those puffy vests he thinks makes him look outdoorsy. Martin showed up in gym clothes like he'd just come from squash. We sat in that living room, same one where I used to sit on the floor while they opened fancy gifts at Christmas. And for the first time, they looked at me like they were seeing a person, not a ghost. Todd cleared his throat. "Look, Eric, about the will." "That was messed up," Lacey nodded. "Dad never told us why. We thought it was your choice to stay away." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was sad how disconnected they really were. "I didn't stay away. I just wasn't invited." Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Martin spoke up. "You know, I told my daughter about you, showed her the ceremony. She said Uncle Eric's like Captain America." That made me smile, even if I didn't believe it. "They didn't offer to rewrite the will. That's not how the world works. You don't get the past fixed with one apology and a plate of Mom's casserole. But they did something else." Todd said, "The company's opening a Veterans Assistance Fund. We want you to consult on it. Help us set it up right." Lacey offered to bring me in as a speaker for a charity gala she was hosting for disabled vets. Martin said he wanted to go shooting together, like brothers should have done a long time ago. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a footnote in my own family story. But here's the truth I haven't told you yet. The medal was nice. The ceremony was moving. But the most important thing that happened came from a stranger. 2 weeks after the broadcast, I got a letter. It was handwritten. Neat. Careful. Dear Sergeant Hale, my son was in that unit outside Mosul. He came home. He never knew why their supplies showed up just in time, but I saw your name on the list and I know it was you. Thank you for giving me my boy back. I read that one 3 times, then I folded it and kept it in my wallet. Because that's what legacy really is. It's not land, it's not stocks. It's the lives you touch that no one sees but remember forever. I didn't move back home. After everything that had happened, I realized I didn't want to go backward. Too many old ghosts in those Ohio walls. I'd spent decades building a life out of silence, grit, and sweat. I didn't need to be surrounded by country clubs and passive-aggressive brunches. But I didn't disappear either. Instead, I took what the Army gave me. Discipline, systems thinking, and a hell of a work ethic. And I built something of my own. You ever try to start a nonprofit? It's harder than people think. Most folks see the fancy fundraisers and tax breaks. What they don't see is the paperwork, the meetings, and the endless phone calls begging for funding. But I wasn't doing it for glory. I was doing it for the guys like me, the ones who served in silence and came back without fanfare, the ones who didn't get parades, who didn't get noticed, who came home with invisible scars and no one to talk to. I called it quiet valor, focused on providing career mentorship, logistics training, and transition support for veterans working behind the scenes. Supply, transport, signal, IT. All the jobs that keep the military running but never get the movie deals. Within 6 months, we had a program running out of a repurposed firehouse in Virginia. Within a year, we were in 4 states, all without a dime from my family. One day I was sorting grant applications in our tiny office when an envelope slid through the mail slot. No return address. Inside was a folded check and a note. From one quiet operator to another, you helped save our unit in 2013. Took me 10 years to say thank you. Here's my way of paying it forward. The check was for $250,000. I nearly fell out of my chair. I never found out who sent it, but that one gift changed everything. We hired staff. We expanded outreach. We started training programs for truck drivers, logistics analysts, and warehouse supervisors. All jobs that veterans were built for but often overlooked. It was the proudest I'd ever been. And yet, something was still unsettled. About 2 years after the award ceremony, I got another call from my brother Todd. He said they were holding a legacy dinner in Dad's name. Said it was part fundraiser, part PR event for the firm. We'd like you to speak, he said. Tell your story. Help the next generation understand what quiet service looks like. I paused. I didn't need to go. Didn't want to be paraded around like some reformed family trophy, but then he said something that changed my mind. I don't want them to remember Dad as the guy who left his son out of the will. I want them to remember him as the guy who raised someone worth listening to. That hit me harder than I expected, so I agreed. The room was packed, suits, donors, a few politicians looking for photo ops. Same country club types I used to avoid. I stepped up to the podium in my simple black blazer, no medals, no uniform, and took a deep breath. I'm not here tonight to rewrite history, I began. I was cut out of my family's will, that's true. I was also invisible to them for most of my life. That's also true. A few gasps. One person dropped their fork. But I don't carry bitterness, I carry service. I carry every unit that made it home because we got them what they needed on time. I carry every soldier who told me, I didn't think we were gonna make it, but we did. I told them about quiet valor, about the men and women rebuilding their lives outside the spotlight. And then I said something I hadn't rehearsed. If you want to honor a legacy, don't name a dinner after a man. Build something that lasts. Give to something that matters. Then I walked off stage. They gave me a standing ovation. I didn't want one, but it meant something. After the event, Todd handed me another envelope. "From Mom," he said. "She wanted you to have this." Inside was a handwritten letter and a small deed transfer. She had legally signed over my grandfather's old service cabin up in Michigan, the one Dad used to fish from every July 4th, the one I was never allowed to use. It was mine now. And in the letter she wrote, "This should have always been yours, not because of what you did, but because of who you are." After that speech at the legacy dinner, I thought things might finally settle. Quiet valor was growing. My family had extended an olive branch. I had that little cabin up in Michigan to retreat to when I needed to breathe. But life has a funny way of not letting you go completely quiet, not when you've still got something to give. One morning, about 6 months after the fundraiser, I got a call from an unfamiliar number in D.C. It was a man from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Said they were organizing a national task force to overhaul how support services reached behind-the-scenes veterans. Logistics, communications, supply, you name it. Apparently, the quiet valor model had caught someone's attention. "We'd like you to be part of it," he said. "Not for optics, for strategy. We need someone who knows what it means to build from the shadows." I said yes. I'd spent most of my adult life taking orders. Now I was sitting in a room with top-level policymakers, giving them the orders. We discussed everything: data tracking, resource allocation, mental health support, workforce transition. I pushed for practical changes, not press releases, not speeches, just boots-on-the-ground solutions. We designed programs to make sure the next generation of silent warriors didn't come home to silence. One pilot program launched in 8 states. Within a year, it expanded to 20. And for the first time, I was seeing change that didn't take decades. It took voices, real ones, voices like mine. Then one morning, I get another call from General Elias Matheson, same man who saluted me on national TV. Only this time, he wasn't in uniform. He'd retired and was helping lead a national veterans coalition. Said he was organizing a televised town hall on veteran reintegration, sponsored by PBS and the National Archive. Wanted me to be the keynote speaker. "You started as a ghost," he said. "Now it's time to speak for the rest of them." I hesitated. I still hated microphones. But something in me shifted. It was time. The auditorium was packed. The broadcast was live. I stood behind the podium, heart steady, voice firm. You don't have to pull a trigger to save lives. You don't have to charge a hill to defend a nation. Sometimes you save a platoon with fuel. Sometimes you keep a base alive with pallets of bottled water. And sometimes you keep a soldier from falling apart, not with medals, but with a steady job and someone who believes in them. I looked into the camera and added, "I was cut out of the will. I was the one they thought didn't matter. But it turns out, I mattered more than they ever knew. Because I wasn't chasing money. I was chasing meaning." It went viral. Veterans all across the country wrote in. Emails, letters, comments, phone calls. I heard from guys I hadn't seen in 30 years. One said, "You just gave me the words I could never say." Back home, things changed too. Lacey invited me to speak at her daughter's high school. Martin started volunteering with a local vet outreach program. Even Todd asked me to help restructure the firm's hiring practices to prioritize veteran applicants. They still lived in their world of suits and brunches. But now, they were trying. And more importantly, they finally respected my path. Mom passed about a year after the town hall, peacefully, in her sleep. I was the one holding her hand. At the funeral, they asked me to give the eulogy. I spoke simply. I said, "My mother loved beauty, order, and tradition, and she raised 4 kids who all chased those things in different ways. I took the long road, the quiet one. But she met me at the end of it, and I think she was proud. I spent more time up at the Michigan cabin after that, fishing, chopping wood, hosting veterans who needed to unplug for a while. Then one afternoon, while going through Mom's old keepsakes, I found a small envelope marked in her handwriting. For Eric, if you ever come home. Inside was a photo of me as a boy, saluting the flag in our backyard with a broomstick for a rifle. On the back, she'd written, "You were always meant to lead. I just didn't see how at the time. I'm sorry, I was looking the wrong way." That broke me, but in the best way. I was never the favored son, never the golden child. I was the one they forgot. But I became the one this country remembered. And in the end, that mattered more than any inheritance. It's funny how life circles back. I started this story as the invisible son, the one who didn't get the handshake, the trust fund, or even a mention in the will. But now I mentor young veterans every week, men and women who remind me of myself at 22, scared and steady, quiet and full of fire. I sit with them, share coffee in silence, talk about purpose, talk about what comes after. Because that's what I needed once. Not a speech, not a parade. Just someone to say, "I see you. I know what you've done." And it mattered. A few months after the town hall went viral, my brother Todd did something I never thought he would. He invited me to the board meeting of our father's firm as a guest speaker. Said the company needed a new kind of leadership perspective. So I showed up, same building where Dad used to rule from behind his walnut desk. I walked into that conference room, sat down in his old leather chair, and looked around the room full of gray suits and tight collars. You all think success is measured in dollars. I used to think that too, until I saw men break down in front of me because no one called when they got home from war. Silence. Your father cut me out of the will, but I don't want his money. I want his company to do something better, start a legacy program that hires vets, create roles for logistics specialists, give guys a second chance the same way I had to give myself one. And to my shock, everyone nodded. They even asked me to return. My 40th high school reunion rolled around. I nearly skipped it. Thought, what's the point? But Ricky, my old best friend, insisted, "Come on, man, let him see who you became." So I went. Same gymnasium, same yellowing banners, same fake punch. But something had changed. People weren't asking, "What do you do?" They were saying, "I saw you on TV. I heard about Quiet Valor. My nephew joined your program. He's back on his feet now." It wasn't the prom king or the startup guy who got the applause that night. It was the quiet soldier who kept his head down and built something out of nothing. You know what I'd say to the 18-year-old version of me standing alone at the bus station, family nowhere in sight? I'd say, "You're not going to fit in, not now, not for a long time. But one day, the very reasons they ignored you will be the reasons the world thanks you." I'd say, don't chase their approval, chase the mission. And that's what I tell every vet who walks through our doors now. I have no mansion, no luxury car, no name on a billboard. But I've got letters from soldiers who made it home. I've got calls from families saying that you saved him. I've got my grandfather's old cabin, my dog Max, and mornings by the fire where I sip coffee and finally feel peace. My siblings, we're on good terms now. They stopped pretending I was broken, and they started realizing maybe I was the one who was whole all along. See, it's easy to look at a man's life and only see what he doesn't have. But sometimes the richest man in the room is the one with a clean conscience, a steady hand, and a purpose that no one else can take. I didn't inherit land. I inherited silence. And from that silence, I built a legacy To every man out there who's been overlooked by his own family, passed over, forgotten, dismissed, hear me clearly. You don't need their permission to live a meaningful life. Your value isn't measured by what they give you. It's measured by what you give others, quietly, consistently, and without asking for applause. And sometimes the world does notice. Sometimes the spotlight finds the man in the shadows. Just be ready when it does. If this story reminded you of something you've lived through or someone you know, drop a comment below. Let your voice be heard. And if you believe in stories that honor the quiet warriors, the forgotten sons, the men who never stopped showing up, hit that like button, subscribe, share it with a brother in arms. Because we all know someone who deserves to be remembered.